It's a great fishing spot, very secluded. It's a little dam on the Merced River. Most of the time when my friend and I went there to fish, there was no one else but us. No wonder the bluegills there are as big as tilapia. Nobody really goes there to fish, I guess. One early morning, I decided to go fishing there alone. At that time, my wife and I were still living in Sonora, California. The drive from Sonora to this fishing spot is about 30 minutes. When I got there in the early morning, it just felt weird. I kept feeling like someone was watching me even though I didn't see anyone around but me. The river was serene, the kind of calm that usually soothes my mind. But that day, it felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a strange stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to my imagination. After all, it was early, and I hadn't had my coffee yet. I set up my gear and started casting my line. The fish were biting, and within the first hour, I had a couple of nice-sized bluegills. But that eerie feeling persisted. Every time I glanced around, expecting to see someone, there was nothing. Just the trees swaying gently in the breeze and the water flowing steadily past. About an hour into my fishing, I noticed a faint smell of perfume. It was subtle at first, like a whiff carried by the wind. I figured maybe someone else had arrived, though I hadn't heard any cars or footsteps. The smell followed me as I moved along the riverbank, trying different spots. It was an odd scent for the outdoors, a floral aroma that seemed out of place in the middle of nowhere. As the morning wore on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. After about 2 hours, I decided I'd had enough. The fish were great, but the unsettling atmosphere was getting to me. I packed up my gear and headed back to my car, constantly glancing over my shoulder. When I got home, the first thing I did was take a shower. I hoped the hot water would wash away the lingering unease. After that, I felt a bit better, so I decided to take a nap on the couch. My wife was sitting there, watching TV. She had a day off but was scheduled to work at 2 p.m. I lay down with my head resting against her left leg, feeling comforted by her presence. The steady hum of the TV and the warmth of her leg lulled me into a deep sleep. I woke up later, feeling groggy. The first thing I noticed was that my wife was still sitting there, her eyes glued to the TV. I glanced at the screen and saw that Final Destination was on. I reached for my phone to check the time and saw it was already 2:30 p.m. Confused, I looked up at my wife and asked, "Babe, why aren't you at work?" She didn't answer me. I blinked a few times, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. When I looked up again, she was gone. The couch was empty. Panic set in as I stood up and looked around the house. I called out for her, but there was no response. I checked the bedroom, the kitchen, and even the bathroom, but she wasn't there. I went to the window and saw that her car was gone. Feeling a bit foolish, I texted her to ask if she was at work. A few minutes later, she replied, saying she had left while I was still sleeping on the couch. I told her what had happened, about seeing her on the couch even after she had left. She brushed it off, saying I must have been dreaming. Later, I called my mom and told her about the strange experience. She listened quietly before saying, "Something might have followed you home from that fishing spot." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but there was something about that day that felt off, something I couldn't quite explain. Not long after that, my friend and his father went fishing at the same spot. On their way back, they stopped at a restroom by some trees. His father went inside and saw a lady with dirty blonde hair, wearing an old, dirty white dress, just staring at the wall. He pretended not to see her, quickly washed his hands, and left. When he told us about it, I felt a sense of validation mixed with a deeper unease. There was definitely something strange about that place. Despite everything, I still go fishing there. The fish are just too good to pass up. But now, every time I go, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. There's a reason why the fish there are so big, and it might have something to do with whatever, or whoever, is lurking around that secluded spot. I remember one particular morning vividly. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale, golden light over the landscape. The river was cloaked in mist, giving it an ethereal quality. As I set up my gear, the perfume smell returned, stronger than before. It wrapped around me like an invisible cloak, its floral scent mingling with the earthy aroma of the riverbank. The feeling of being watched was even more pronounced. I scanned the area, my eyes darting from tree to tree, but saw nothing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional splash of a fish or the rustling of leaves. I tried to focus on fishing, but my mind kept wandering back to the strange occurrences. After a couple of hours, I decided to call it a day. As I packed up my gear, I felt a sudden chill, as if a cold breeze had blown through. But the air was still. I hurried back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. When I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I told my wife about the strange experiences, but she was skeptical. "Maybe it's just your imagination," she suggested. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A few days later, I received a call from my friend. He and his father had gone back to the fishing spot. This time, his father had a more disturbing encounter. While using the restroom, he saw the same lady with dirty blonde hair and the old white dress. This time, she turned to look at him, her eyes vacant and unblinking. He quickly left, shaken by the encounter. My friend's father wasn't the kind of man to scare easily, but the look in his eyes when he told me the story was one of pure fear. It was then that I realized there was something truly unsettling about that place. Over the next few months, I couldn't stop thinking about the fishing spot and the strange occurrences. I did some research, hoping to find some explanation. I discovered that the area had a dark history. Decades ago, a woman had drowned in the river under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was an accident, while others believed it was foul play. Her body was found near the spot where we fished, and since then, there had been reports of strange sightings and unexplained phenomena. The more I learned, the more uneasy I felt. I didn't believe in ghosts, but the stories and my experiences were hard to ignore. I decided to take a break from fishing at that spot, hoping some distance would help me clear my head. One day, as I was walking through a local market, I saw an old man selling handmade wooden charms. He claimed they were for protection and warding off evil spirits. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but something compelled me to buy one. I hung it on my rearview mirror, hoping it might offer some comfort or protection. A few weeks later, I decided to return to the fishing spot. I told myself I was being silly, that there was nothing to fear. But as I drove up to the river, the familiar sense of unease washed over me. The charm swung gently from the mirror, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. The morning was overcast, the sky a dull gray that matched my mood. As I set up my gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The perfume smell returned, stronger than ever, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to focus on fishing, but my heart wasn't in it. After an hour, I decided to call it a day. As I packed up my gear, I felt a sudden urge to look behind me. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was a woman in a white dress. Her hair was dirty blonde, and she stared at me with hollow, vacant eyes. My blood ran cold, and I felt rooted to the spot. She raised her hand, as if to wave, but the motion was slow and deliberate, almost unnatural. I blinked, and she was gone. I've had my fair share of apartment tales over the years, but one story stands out vividly in my memory. It revolves around my grandmother, a woman with a knack for sensing things before they happen. A trait that both intrigued and occasionally unnerved me. Growing up, I often found myself listening to her recount eerie ghost stories passed down through generations. Despite her captivating narratives, I remained skeptical, dismissing them as nothing more than folklore meant to entertain. That all changed when we moved into my uncle's spacious apartment. It was a chilly winter in 1996 when we made the move. The apartment, located in a quaint corner of our city, seemed like an upgrade from our previous place. Little did I know, it harbored something beyond my comprehension. My grandmother, always bustling with energy despite her age, helped unpack her beloved yarn bags as soon as we settled in. Yet, amid the excitement of rearranging furniture and settling into our new space, something peculiar caught her attention. I remember her suddenly pausing, her expression shifting from cheerful to uneasy in an instant. "Is everything all right, Grandma?" I asked, concern lacing my voice. She hesitated, her gaze flickering around the room as if searching for unseen shadows. "There's something here," she finally muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that doesn't want us here." I chuckled nervously, brushing off her words with a hint of skepticism. "Oh, come on, Grandma," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "It's a bit late for that now, isn't it?" Little did I realize then, my nonchalant dismissal would come back to haunt me, quite literally. The days passed uneventfully until one evening, just before Christmas. My mom was engrossed in her favorite holiday movie, It's a Wonderful Life, while I lounged on the couch, half watching the screen and half lost in my own thoughts. That's when it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting movement caught my attention. I glanced towards the kitchen doorway, dismissing it as fatigue playing tricks on my mind. But then it happened again. A shadowy figure darting across the doorway, swift and silent. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Could it be exhaustion? Or was there really something there? I forced myself to look away, trying to rationalize what I had just witnessed. Yet, each time I looked back, there it was, an indistinct silhouette lingering in the shadows of the kitchen doorway. It resembled a man, but devoid of any discernible features, as if cloaked in darkness itself. Fear crept over me like a shroud, but curiosity held me in its grip. I couldn't tear my eyes away, despite every instinct screaming at me to flee. "What did you see?" My brother's voice cut through the tense silence, startling me back to reality. I don't know," I stammered, torn between disbelief and a primal sense of dread. Determined to confront whatever lurked in the darkness, my brother ventured into the kitchen with our dog, an energetic mutt named Max who never backed down from a challenge. As they entered the dimly lit room, I held my breath, anticipating something. Max's reaction shattered the eerie calm. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his throat, a sound I had never heard him make before. Then, with a sharp yelp of pain, he bolted back into the living room, tail tucked between his legs, seeking refuge under the safety of our couch. My blood ran cold. Whatever lingered in that apartment was real, and it was not friendly. In the days that followed, unease settled over our once happy home like a thick fog. Strange noises echoed through the halls at night. Whispers carried on the wind, chilling me to the bone. Sleep became elusive, plagued by restless dreams and unexplained shadows dancing at the edge of my vision. We couldn't ignore it any longer. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, suffocating us with its silent malevolence. A week later, we made the decision to leave. Years passed, but the memory of that haunting experience lingered, etched into my mind like a scar. Driving by the apartment recently, I saw it undergoing renovations. A new beginning, perhaps, for the space that once held such darkness. I couldn't help but wonder, had anyone else felt its presence? Had the renovations stirred something dormant, or had the entity moved on, satisfied with its unsettling legacy? That night forever changed me. It shattered my skepticism and instilled a newfound respect for the mysteries that lurk beyond our understanding. Some things defy explanation, lingering on the fringes of our perception, waiting to be discovered, or perhaps waiting for us to acknowledge their existence. Back in the early 90s, my family lived in Dundale, a quaint village nestled somewhere in the heart of America. Our house sat across from an old church dating back to the 15th century, a relic of times past that added a touch of eerie charm to our neighborhood. Behind our rented house stretched a small plot where, centuries ago, criminals were said to be buried outside the consecrated grounds of the church cemetery. It was an L-shaped house, 2 stories tall, originally built in the 18th century as a butcher's residence. Despite its age, the house exuded a certain rustic charm that drew my parents to rent it. One thing about that house, though, whenever it rained, a musty sulfur-like smell would waft through the air, making our cozy abode feel a tad more mysterious than usual. One summer, while my parents were away on vacation, my no-nonsense atheist uncle, Jake, came to babysit my younger sister and me. I was 4 years old at the time, and my sister was just 3. One stormy night, after tucking us into bed, Uncle Jake retired to the guest room adjacent to the staircase leading to the upper wing where my sister and I slept. All was quiet until the early hours of the morning when he was roused from his sleep by faint creaking noises echoing from the upstairs hallway. Initially dismissing them, he soon heard the creaks grow louder, prompting him to investigate. Concerned that my sister or I might be awake and wandering, he tiptoed upstairs to check on us. To his relief, we were both sound asleep in our beds, undisturbed by whatever was causing the noise. Relieved but still curious, Uncle Jake returned downstairs to the guest room. However, the eerie creaking sounds persisted, now seemingly following him from the upstairs hallway. Annoyed by the disturbance, he decided to confront it head-on and ascended the stairs once more. As he climbed, the creaking turned into distinct footsteps, echoing ominously through the old house. The footsteps seemed to traverse the hallway, then suddenly took a sharp turn toward the staircase where Uncle Jake stood, frozen in disbelief. Leaning against the railing, he watched in stunned silence as the footsteps passed right by him, continuing down the stairs and fading into the living room. The living room, once the heart of the butcher's shop that had been added to the house in later years, held a massive fireplace that dominated one wall, a reminder of its historical past. The sudden presence of these spectral footsteps left Uncle Jake shaken to the core. In a panic, he flicked on every light switch within reach, flooding the house with light in an attempt to dispel the eerie ambience. For a few tense moments, everything was quiet again, the strange sounds mercifully absent. It was a relief, but also deeply unsettling. When my parents returned from their holiday, Uncle Jake wasted no time recounting his chilling experience. Concerned for our well-being and perhaps a bit unnerved themselves, they sought guidance from a local pastor who performed a blessing on the house. According to them, The paranormal disturbances ceased after that, leaving our household to return to its normal, albeit still slightly haunted, existence. Years later, as we reminisced about our time in Dundale, the story of Uncle Jake's encounter with the unexplained became a cherished family tale. Even though I've grown skeptical of the supernatural over the years, that night remains a vivid memory. It was June of this year when I, my friend Dexter, and my little sister, Lily, decided to take a long weekend camping trip to a popular state park a few hours away from our home. With summer just beginning, we were eager to escape the city and embrace the tranquility of nature. I meticulously planned a variety of fun activities for us, including hiking, fishing, and even a visit to a ghost town I had discovered on the map while preparing for the trip. The lack of information available about this ghost town on Google made it all the more intriguing, like a hidden gem waiting to be uncovered. We set off early on a bright Friday morning, our spirits high as we loaded our gear into the truck. The drive to the state park was picturesque, with rolling hills, dense forests, and the occasional glimmer of a distant lake. As we drove, the cityscape gradually gave way to rural tranquility, the concrete jungle replaced by vast expanses of greenery. The anticipation of adventure buzzed in the air, and we chatted excitedly about our plans for the weekend. We arrived at the park by mid-morning and quickly set up camp. The campground was nestled in a serene valley, surrounded by towering pine trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Birds chirped merrily, and the distant sound of a flowing stream added to the idyllic atmosphere. Once our tents were pitched and the firewood gathered, we decided to embark on our first adventure, exploring the ghost town. I pulled out my map and GPS, eager to navigate the way to our mysterious destination. We piled back into the truck, our two dogs, a large chocolate Labrador named Max and a feisty Australian shepherd named Daisy, eagerly hopping in with us. The dogs were as excited as we were, tails wagging and noses twitching at the promise of new scents and sights. The drive to the ghost town started on a well-paved two-lane road that wound its way up the mountain. The higher we climbed, the more the trees thickened, their branches forming a green canopy that blocked out the sun. The air grew cooler, and the scent of pine was intoxicating. We drove deeper and deeper into the wilderness, the road narrowing to a single lane, the signs of civilization becoming fewer and farther between. Dexter, usually the more cautious of us, began to express his concern. "Are you sure about this, Alex? We've got Lily with us, and we're heading into the middle of nowhere." I glanced at him, then back at the road. "I know it seems a bit sketchy, but that's what makes it an adventure. Besides, we're well prepared. We have our gear, the dogs, and we're both armed, just in case." Lily, always the curious one, chimed in from the back seat. "I think it's exciting. Who knows what we'll find there?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and despite Dexter's reservations, we pressed on. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, its rough surface making the truck jostle and shake. The trees grew even denser, their trunks thick and gnarled, like silent sentinels guarding an ancient secret. The GPS indicated that we were getting close, but the journey seemed to stretch on forever. Just when our excitement began to wane, the gravel road ended at a stop sign. The trees suddenly parted, and the bright sunlight flooded in, illuminating the two-lane road ahead. We all breathed a sigh of relief. The GPS directed us to take the next right turn. As soon as we did, the road narrowed once more to a single lane of gravel, and we saw the ghost town ahead. The sight was both eerie and captivating. Weathered gray buildings, some standing tall and defiant, others crumbling and consumed by time. It felt like stepping back into another era, a place frozen in the past. We parked the truck at the edge of the town and got out, the dogs straining at their leashes, eager to explore. Max and Daisy immediately went on high alert, their ears perked and bodies tense. Daisy's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling from her throat. "Looks like the dog sensed something," Dexter remarked, his tone uneasy. I nodded, feeling a twinge of apprehension. "Let's stick together and be cautious." We walked down the main road, the gravel crunching under our boots. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of an old building or the distant call of a bird. The town felt abandoned, yet there was an undeniable sense of being watched. One house stood out among the rest. It was newer, its paint less weathered, and it looked as though someone might still live there. The front door was open, and I thought I saw a flicker of movement inside. "Do you think someone lives there?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "I'm not sure," I replied, my eyes fixed on the house. "Maybe it's a caretaker or someone passing through." As we approached, the dogs grew more agitated. We walked past the house and a creepy, broken swing set, entering the heart of the ghost town. The buildings here were older, some standing tall while others had collapsed into piles of rubble. I snapped a few photos, but the feeling of being watched persisted, gnawing at my nerves. Dexter, ever the adventurer, decided to get some shots of the interiors. "I'm going to check out the windows, see what's inside," he said, already moving toward one of the buildings. "I don't know, Dex," I hesitated. "Something doesn't feel right." "We've got our concealed carry permits and our guns," he reassured me, patting his side where his 1911.45 was holstered. "We'll be fine." Despite his confidence, a wave of uneasiness washed over me. I kept close to Lily, feeling an overwhelming urge to protect her. As Dexter climbed onto the porch of one of the buildings, Daisy let out a low, menacing growl, her eyes fixed on an upper window. "Okay, I'm done. Let's go," I shouted, my voice shaking with fear. Dexter jogged back to us, and we started toward the truck. As we passed the newer house, I noticed the front door was now closed. Lily saw it too and pointed it out, just as Daisy went ballistic, barking and snarling, lunging toward the house with a fury I had never seen before. Max was on high alert, his eyes darting between the house and the town behind us. We quickly climbed into the truck, our hearts pounding. We decided to take a different route back, avoiding the narrow, perilous road we had come in on. The drive back was tense, the silence heavy with unspoken fears. That evening, after we had settled back at the campsite and tucked Lily into bed, Dexter and I sat by the fire, reviewing the photos from our ghost town adventure. The crackling of the fire was comforting, a stark contrast to the unsettling experience we had just endured. As Dexter flipped through the images on his phone, his expression changed from one of curiosity to one of horror. He zoomed in on one of the window shots, his hand trembling as he handed the phone to me. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Look," he said, his voice shaky. "In the window." I took the phone and looked at the photo. There, clearly visible in the reflection, were short, light gray creatures with large heads and black eyes. They had small nubs or button-like horns on their foreheads and the sides of their heads. One of them appeared to have wings, lined with similar nubs. A cold chill ran down my spine. My mind raced with questions. What were these creatures? How had we not seen them while we were there? And most terrifying of all, what might have happened if they had chosen to reveal themselves? Dexter and I sat in stunned silence, the weight of what we had seen sinking in. The The fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on our faces. We both knew that this experience had changed us, leaving us with more questions than answers. "I wonder who was in that newer house," I mused aloud. Was it one of those creatures? Or maybe a human living among them? "Maybe it was someone who stumbled upon the town like we did," Dexter suggested. "Someone who didn't know what lurks in those buildings." As we sat there, contemplating the possibilities, we realized that we would never get the answers we sought. The ghost town had revealed its secrets to us, but it had also shown us the dangers of curiosity. We made a silent pact to never return to that place, to keep our experience to ourselves and warn others to stay away. Later that night, as I lay in my sleeping bag, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The images of those creatures haunted me, their large black eyes staring into my soul. I knew that this was an experience I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The next morning, we packed up our campsite and headed home, our spirits dampened by the previous day's events. The drive back was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. Lily, sensing the change in our demeanor, didn't ask about the ghost town, and we didn't volunteer any information. As we settled back into our routine, the memory of the ghost town slowly began to fade, but the fear and unease lingered. Every time I looked at the photos, I was reminded of the strange, otherworldly creatures we had encountered. I couldn't help but wonder if they were still there, watching and waiting for the next curious souls to wander into their domain. Months passed, and life returned to normal, but the ghost town remained a haunting presence in the back of my mind. I would occasionally dream about it, the eerie silence, the dilapidated buildings, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. Each time, I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. One day, Dexter called me, his voice filled with excitement. "Alex, you won't believe this. I did some research on that ghost town. Apparently, it's been abandoned for decades, and there are numerous reports of strange sightings and unexplained phenomena there." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "So, we're not the only ones who've experienced something there?" "Not at all," Dexter replied. "There are stories of people seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing strange noises, and even encountering creatures similar to the ones we saw in the photos." The revelation both comforted and terrified me. It was reassuring to know that we weren't alone in our experience, but it also confirmed that the ghost town was a place of true mystery and danger. Dexter and I agreed to keep our findings to ourselves, not wanting to attract attention to the town and potentially put others at risk. The ghost town had left an indelible mark on our lives, and we wanted to ensure that no one else had to endure the same terror we had faced. As the years went by, the ghost town became a distant memory, a story we only shared with those closest to us.